consider the situation of a person using a string attached to a stone at one end, and he's kind of spinning it about over his head for some reason. If we kind of take this motion to be more or less circular, because you are going to be moving your hand around, so it's not really circular because the center itself is shifting. That's just the reality of the situation. But assuming that the object is having a fixed radius, a fixed center, and it's going around, then you can say that the object is taking a circular path, something like that. Wow, that doesn't look circular at all. Okay. Now, if this were the object and that were the center, and that is the string that is causing it to rotate, and let's say that the object is turning in this manner. Okay. Now, what can you say about the motion of this object, the stone? What are all the different things that you can say about it? List them out.
There's a force acting on it. I mean, it's accelerated motion.
Yeah, so the first point is that it is accelerated motion. Okay, so that's the important thing. Now, you can ask the question, why do you say it's an accelerated motion?
It's constantly changing direction.
It's constantly changing direction. Yeah, so we can say that the object is moving, so therefore it has a speed. So we can say that, okay, let the speed of this object, the stone, be something, or let's say 3 meters per second. Okay, so the speed itself is not changing, so therefore why claim that it is accelerated motion? We know that the object is going only at a uniform speed but not at a uniform velocity. So when it comes to considering the velocity part, then we know that since it is constantly changing the direction of its motion, the velocity is not considered constant. In fact, if I ask you at that point over there, how will you represent its velocity? Then what would it be? So velocity is a vector quantity, right? So you represent it with an arrow pointing in a certain direction. So if I were to ask you to represent its velocity at that point, if we freeze that point, then how would you represent it?
Look at the angular change.
No, so you want to represent instantaneous velocity at that point. So how will you do that? How will you use a vector to represent that?
The tangent, right?
So can you explain tangent? At what point?
Basically at whatever point that is, like
Yeah.
the straight line going from that, like exactly from that point, yeah.
So if I draw a tangent here, and presumably it is 90 degrees to the string, it doesn't look like that in this, but it's not to scale. So that represents the velocity of the object.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I like pretty sure.
Okay. So one, can somebody suggest a proof for why this is correct?
Let the string go.
Let the string go. So if you let the string go,
or cut it off.
Yeah, or cut it, one or the other. If you do that, then what will happen is the stone will then move. I'll show it at another point because it's too close to the edge over there. So let's say the stone a short while later is at this point. Okay, and you let go of the stone at this point. So going with what Ayan said, then the velocity at this point will be tangential at that direction. And then if you let the string go, then the stone would then move in this direction. Of course, the string will trail like that, and so on, right? Sorry that, okay. And of course, that will happen until it kind of falls down to the ground. So that is the proof that the velocity of the object at any point on the circular track is tangential at that point. And the proof is that if you let go of the string or you cut the string, then it is going to move tangentially. Of course, in this case, it will move out tangentially, but then it will also fall to the ground because gravity will immediately start acting on it. But relative to the circular path, it's going to go out tangentially. Okay, so we know that. Now compare the two positions. Am I recording? Yeah. Compare the two positions, this position A and this position B. Okay, how do you compare their velocities, assuming that the speed has not changed at all?
The direction.
The direction has changed. In fact, if you take a very small moment after that point and consider the direction of motion at that point, again the direction of motion at that point would have changed, right? And a little while later after that also, if you consider it, even there the direction of motion would have changed. So what happens in circular motion, therefore, is that an object that is undergoing circular motion is constantly changing the direction of motion. If you don't change the direction of motion constantly, then an object cannot be in circular motion or any kind of a curvilinear path at all. If we are looking at circular motion, so we can just say uniform circular motion, but even a curved path of any kind is impossible to maintain unless there is a change in the direction. So that is why Ishan's first observation is that the object is therefore accelerated motion. Okay. Now from second law, we can say that if an object is undergoing accelerated motion, right, then there has to be what? What causes an object to accelerate?
Of
Force.
course.
A force.
External imbalance force.
An external imbalance force. So combining first law and second law, we can then say that without the presence of an external unbalanced force, no acceleration is possible. But then it seems mysterious, where is the force acting in this? Okay, but there is an acceleration, so therefore there has to be a force. So where does the force come from in this case, in this particular case?
The center, I mean the string.
Exactly. So the force therefore has to come in this case from the string, that is the stone will get the force from the string, the tension in the string, and the string of course gets the force because you are the person who is you're holding it and you're actually spinning it around. So you're pulling the string and making it to go around. So therefore the force that is responsible for creating this rotational motion is the tension in this string. That is why if you cut the tension by snipping it with a pair of scissors or something like that, I know somebody is going to say that looks like a big bunny, but I don't care. So if you cut the string at that point of time, then the tension disappears, and the moment the tension disappears, the object will just shoot out in the tangential path at that point. Okay, so this kind of a force which produces uniform circular motion has a special name. The force is called a centripetal force. Okay, and centripetal means center, and petal means seeking. So that is why centripetal force, it seeks the center, and therefore you can remember that the centripetal force always acts towards the center of the motion. Okay. Now this is also true. We'll talk about one or two more examples when you are running on a circular track, or for that matter in our football field when we have sports fest, if we are going to have sports fest. Then when you run on the curved path of that part of the track, then you are undergoing circular motion because you are changing direction, and you cannot stay on the curved path without changing direction, and therefore you are using a centripetal force. But in that case, there is no string that is tying you to the center. Okay, so the centripetal force has to be produced by you. And if you observe carefully, the next time you are doing this, you have to run. When you are walking, it's not so clear, but when you run, it is quite clear that when you push against the outside with your shoes, you are actually using the friction between your shoe and the ground in order to create the centripetal force required for you to change the direction. So you are basically pushing inwards against the ground to produce the centripetal force, required centripetal force. And the proof for this is, if you are wearing old shoes, if your shoe bottom has got worn out, then when you attempt to turn very fast, then the shoe will slip out from under you. If you are going too fast, you could have a very bad fall and injure yourself quite badly. The same thing happens in some funny situations, like for example, when a dog, if those of you who have pets or have seen dogs that are kept mostly in the house, if you have a dog that's trying to come run inside the house and it makes a sharp turn, right, on a smooth floor like a marble floor or a tiled floor, or it's not good for these animals actually if you keep them indoors in such conditions. But well, modern urban living forces these kinds of things on poor pet animals. But have you observed them kind of scrambling on the ground? So they are kind of turning, and as they turn, you can see that they are slipping. So they kind of scramble with their paws, and there is a kind of distinct sound that their nails make on the ground when they do that. And that is because they are seeking to gain good enough centripetal force so that they can execute the turn for whatever it is that they are pursuing. So these are sort of one or two examples of how centripetal force comes into play when an object has to undergo a motion along a curved track or a curved path. And that without centripetal force, it would not be possible to execute that kind of motion. Okay, so with that, I hope the idea of a centripetal force is clear. And as far as the exam is concerned, you just have to give some examples of centripetal force acting and also make the connection between the fact that a uniform circular motion is not possible unless and until there is a centripetal force. There is another fictitious force that also operates in this same manner, and for that, again, I think I have done this in class 8. So I'm going to have somebody hanging by their hand like that. Do you remember this example? I don't know, who do we hang like that? Let's hang Tanvi. Okay, so I haven't hanged her by the neck. She's hanging by her hand, so she can let go and fall to the ground anytime. And then I'm going to start kind of spinning her around like this. Okay, and oh, I should have said something about this position, the initial position. Okay, I'll just draw that over here. Oh,
So hands.
okay. I was wondering why does it look odd? Okay. So then I asked Tanvi, I will hang her by her hand like that. And I said, just hold on for the love of physics for a while. I want you to answer some questions. I said, do you feel a push or a pull? And of course, she'll say, yeah, I feel a push and a pull. So in what direction are you feeling the push or a pull? So she says, I feel a pull in the upward direction. So the string is holding me up. So there is a pull in the upward direction. And there is a force of gravity that's acting in the downward direction. Okay, so there is gravity and there is tension. Okay, so that's in the static equilibrium situation. So now I'm going to start spinning her about an axis. So she's going to be spinning around like that. Okay, she doesn't like it. She's going to be very unhappy, but I have to do it. And then as she's spinning around, I ask her, do you still feel a push or a pull? And she's trying to answer as best as she can. She says, yeah, of course I feel a push or a pull. So in what direction is it working? So she says there's a tension that's acting towards, in the string. And I said, do you feel gravity? And she says, yeah, I feel gravity. So in what direction? She says opposite to the tension. Okay. Now there is something obviously weird about that, because we all know that gravity always has to act perpendicular to the ground. Gravity cannot act in any other direction. But why is it that she feels that there is gravity pulling her in this direction? Okay, that's because she feels that if she lets go of the rope, she's going to fly out this direction. Okay, but that of course is not the case, because if she lets go, then what's going to happen is she's going to fly outwards, out of the whiteboard. Okay, but when you are being spun around, you feel as if you are going to get pushed in this direction. And this force that you're feeling is not the gravitational force, it's actually a result of holding on to the rope. Okay, and that force is what is known sometimes as the centrifugal force. So this force is what is known as the centrifugal force, that is away from the center. See, it moves away from the center point through which you're rotating, if you look at it from the top. Okay, so that centrifugal force is actually not a real force. It is what is referred to as a fictitious force. Okay, and therefore it doesn't actually exist. It's the same as the centripetal force, except it feels like it is acting in the outward direction. Now, any argument that is given and the general examples that are given are when somebody is doing this trick with the bucket, where they have a rope. Okay, it's still there, and there is a bucket with water in it, right? And you are spinning this bucket around. Okay, so then they say that why does the bucket remain, if you spin it fast enough, of course, why does the water remain in the bucket? Well, the water remains in the bucket not because, and maybe in your exam for ICSE you may have to write centrifugal force, because it looks as if the water is being pulled in the other direction. The water is not the one that is being pulled in the other direction, it's the bucket which is being pulled in the inward direction, right? And if the bucket is pulling it sufficiently quickly, then the water does not have time to respond to gravity. The centripetal force that is acting over here is far greater than the gravitational force. Okay, so it seems like the bucket is sticking to the top. That's not the water is sticking to the top of the bucket, but actually that's not the case. It's just that its inertia is going along in a certain way, right? and the force of gravity is insufficient to cause it to fall down because the centripetal force is keeping it in that position. So that is why it keeps undergoing that motion without falling down. You can do the same kind of a trick with a coin suspended on a hanger. That's an interesting sort of trick. I used to be able to do this once. I recently found out that I'm not able to do it anymore. So you just basically put a coin on a hanger like that, and then you spin the hanger around your finger like that, and the coin doesn't fall. And then you can, if you're getting skilled enough, you can also stop the hanger with the coin still, hanging to the same spot. All of this is possible because of uh, centripetal force, but your textbook likes to call it the centrifugal force. I say the centrifugal force doesn't exist. It's a fictitious force. There are several examples for these. There are fairground rides.
Arun sir,
Yeah.
so the thing that you do with the eraser, like you have the eraser in your palm and you just make it go. Yeah, it's that, right? Basically.
There is a dance also like that, right? In which you keep diyas in your hand and you dance.
Yeah.
That's also based on the same concept. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if they study centripetal forces to learn how to dance, that particular dance, but it's a pretty intuitive thing. If you turn it fast enough, then you're not going to drop the object. And you can do it with any object in your hand. So put some object in the palm of your hand and sort of do it fast enough. I can't do it in the space that is there over here, but you can do it fast enough, you get it right. So fairground rides are some in which this concept of the centripetal force is used to create some thrills. I think I have drawn this diagram of something that I went to in SL Park, SL World many years ago, 30 years or so ago. So it remains in my mind. Then what else? Washing machine dryers work in the same principle. So there's a spinning.
Artificial gravity.
So there is a spinning drum, and then you have all these clothes inside it, and then there is a kind of axis. When this spins fast enough, because of the holes that are present in the side, the water kind of spills out from the sides. Okay, and then you find that the clothes are stuck to the sides of the drum when it's done. So that means that centripetal force has been acting. And then the speed with which it rotates determines how much centripetal force is, but that's not dealt with in our syllabus, so we don't need to bother about it. And then the third example that I wanted to give was a centrifuge. So a centrifuge, again, I've demonstrated it. I think we did it with silver chloride solution and something else. So if you have a sort of substance in which there is a finely dissolved, finely suspended particles. Those particles are so light in weight that the thermal agitation that is there in the liquid itself will never allow those particles to settle down at the bottom. So gravity is just simply not enough to cause the sedimentation to occur. So then what you do is you put it in a machine called as a centrifuge. So it has an axis like that, and then you rotate the test tube, a vial actually, it's not really a test tube. Spin it around fast enough, you can go up to what, 3600 plus RPM. And what happens is at those speeds, these particles are going to experience a centripetal force towards the center and therefore a fictitious force towards the other side. Okay, and therefore what will happen is because of the gravity, they are going to increase in the gravity. So that is what you mean by extra G's. Pilots who fly fighter planes, they have to execute turns and loops. So during the execution of the turns and loops, they are going to be experiencing this centrifugal force, which actually increases the amount of gravity that your body is acted upon by. And so you can experience up to 2 or 3 Gs when you're undergoing, turns in such fast airplanes. So in those situations, unless you are trained for it, you have to wear special pressure suits so that the blood doesn't drain from some parts of your body, like for example, the upper part in the head. Otherwise, you will black out. And if you black out on a fast fighter plane, then you are finished. But coming back to the centrifuge, the particles would then move towards the outside. And then when you stop the spinning, you will find that the particles have embedded themselves on the side like this. So that way you have decanted the substance, sediment, your forced sedimentation to take place. So these are some examples of how centripetal and centrifugal forces work. So with that, we come to the end of this chapter.